Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The emergency announcement was done earlier this evening by automation this year for the first time. Introduce myself. I'm Richard Lawton, resident here in Durham with my wife Kim, and our kids were all raised and gone through the English River School District. The work of the evening tonight is the warrant articles and going over them, approving them for the ballot for 2015. We will use Robert's Rules of Order as we do every year. We'd like everybody to speak once before you speak again if somebody else wants to have a chance. We'd like to bring up new issues each time and not just repeat the same one if possible. We'd like to also give everybody a chance to speak if they want to. So I don't see a big crowd here tonight, so why don't we get started? The first work of the evening, we have a Distinguished Service Award, which will be presented by Sarah Farrell.
They have us packed in very tightly up there. Okay, tonight the 2014-2015 Distinguished Service Award goes to Paul Gazowski. Paul is a man Paul, I'm thrilled to be able to give you this award tonight. Paul is a man who envisioned a sustainable future for ORCSD. His advocacy and persistence has impacted our district beyond his tenure as a faculty member. Paul was one of the first staff members at ORHS to begin advocating for sustainable environmental practices. His willingness to speak out about the need for our district to examine its practices and adopt sustainable approaches began while he was a teacher at the high school and has continued in his early retirement years. In 2011, Paul advocated for a petition warrant article to be added to the ballot in March for residents to vote on, to form a study committee that would be charged with reviewing the district's options for becoming an environmentally sustainable school district. This proved to be a successful undertaking with ORCSD, voting in favor of this petition with a 1,237 to 838 vote, establishing this committee. Paul moved forward with this committee, acting as chairman for 2011 and 2012. He had actively helped connect ORCSD food service to local farmers since 2012 and is still active with the Massway Green Team and with ORCSD food service through those local food source. Paul is the father of the ORHS Video Production Department. He introduced video production technology to the high school, and without his vision, we would not have the vibrant program we have today. He guided the school district's adoption and use of local access cable TV for school board meetings and school events. His work with students was the precursor to ORTV today. Paul's advocacy during the planning and building of the renovated high school is a big part of the reason we have a state-of-the-art TV production room. All of the students at Oyster River High School that have been involved in video production over the last 25 years owe a great deal to Paul Gazowski. Paul has served on the Town of Lee Agricultural Committee since 2006. He co-designed Lee Agricultural and Farm List from 2012 to 2014. Helped with harvest dinners, breakfast, farmers market, and hosts the Backyard Farming Series. He also is a big organizer of the Lee Farm Games, which is a personal family favorite. My husband has had lots of fun at those, throwing large boulders and stacking hay bales. He also has been on the Lee Public Library Community Center Building Committee since 2012. It is safe to say that without Paul's passion and vision for a sustainable future in the OR community, our school district would be a very different place. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, we'll begin the work of the evening, which is the 2015 school warrant articles. I'd first like to read the posting of the MS-26 default budget. I certify that on 1/23/15, I posted the MS-26, the default budget, and the written warrant attested by the school board of the Oyster River Cooperative School District in the town of Durham at the Oyster River High School, the place of meeting in the town of Lee at the Mass Way School, in the town of Madbury at the Heritage School. It is signed by Wendy DeFusio, and it is notarized. I have that. So now we'll move on to the warrant articles. To the 2015 school warrant, to the inhabitants of the Oyster River Cooperative School District, Durham, Lee, and Madbury, qualified to vote upon district affairs. You are hereby notified to meet at the Oyster River High School in said district on the 3rd day of February 2015 at 7 o'clock in the evening for session 1 of the annual school district meeting for discussion of Articles 3 through 7 and for any amendments thereto. Warrant articles whose wording is prescribed by law shall not be amended, and no warrant article shall be amended to eliminate the subject matter of the article at session 1. Official balloting, voting for the school district officers, Articles 1 and 2, and on Articles 3 through 7 will occur at the town polling locations on Tuesday, March 10, 2015. The town of Durham, the Oyster River High School, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The town of Lee, at the Lee Safety Complex, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Town of Madbury, the Madbury Town Hall, 11 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Article 1 will be to choose a moderator for the coming year. Article 2, to choose 3 school board members, 1 each from Durham, Lee, and Madbury for the ensuing 3 years. The first warrant article that we have the evening to be presented will be warrant Article 3 by Kenny Rotner.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Kenny Rotner, and I'm the school board representative that will be presenting Article 3. And so I would like to move that we put forward Article 3. It reads, shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $2 million for the renovation and construction of athletic fields and a track at Oyster River High School, and to authorize the issuance of not more than $1,700,000 of bonds or notes to be paid over a 10-year period in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Finance Act, RSA Chapter 33, and to authorize the school board to issue and negotiate such bonds or notes, and in addition to raise and appropriate the sum of $36,833 for the first year's principal and interest payment on the bonds or notes, and $300,000 to come from expendable trust funds for this purpose. The school board recommends this appropriation. A 3/5 ballot vote will be required for passage.
Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion? Discussion? Explanation?
I'd like to read the explanation, and then I have a couple of slides to show, and I also have something I'd like to read. The explanation that we've written: warrant Article 3 asks Oyster River taxpayers to approve a bond of up to $1.7 million over a 10-year period to fund the cost for an athletic facility upgrade project at the high school. This project will include an all-weather track, an artificial turf, rectangular playing field, and reconfigured baseball and softball fields. The estimated total cost of the project is $2 million. An artificial turf field will improve drainage and allow for much greater utilization of the field. The reconfiguration of our baseball and softball fields will provide for multi-use play. Assuming the $1.7 million bond is approved by the voters, the remaining $300,000 for the project has been previously fundraised and will be used to fund the construction of the all-weather track. The board anticipates that additional fundraising will make possible enhancements to the project to include field lights and dugouts. And then 2 slides we have to begin. Let me go back to this one. This slide summarizes the expense of the athletic field upgrade and what the estimated tax burden will be for the 3 different towns. In the fiscal year 16, where just the interest is being paid, the value is the $36,833, and the corresponding tax burden is listed. And then the years progress, taking us through the 10 years. The amount reaches its peak quickly, and then as the principal is paid off and interest payments are lower, that price descends, as do the corresponding tax assessments that will be leveled against residents of the 3 communities. And this slide shows it in a different way. It shows how we're paying 0 principal in that first year, but paying the interest, and then summarizes the principal that's paid each year and how the interest rate declines as there's less outstanding balance, and it gives us the amount that will be paid each year. So that is that. And now I'd like to speak to this motion. And I've thought about this a lot these past years as we've tried to upgrade our athletic facilities at the schools, and certainly thought about it even more as of late as this night approaches. And I'm sorry if my comments will be lengthy, but I feel that this situation really warrants it, because I think there's a lot of issues to discuss as we talk about these fields. So to begin, our current facility, which is shown here on the left, includes a grass varsity field that needs a stretch of the imagination to truly be recognized as a grass field. The soil is greatly compacted, the grass is thin and without any depth, and for a good deal of the time, it's either muddy or frozen. Its use is severely limited by these factors, and its drainage and runoff is not at all controlled. The current orientation of the baseball field presents a very dangerous situation whereby batters are hitting towards the junior varsity field, which is often concurrently being used for field hockey or soccer. This junior varsity field has even poorer turf than the varsity field, if that's at all possible, and is also extremely uneven with dips and upslopes. Completely absent, as you can see on the left, from our current facility is a track, despite the great number of student athletes who participate in track or cross country. At this time, the athletic department is forced to rent track time at UNH and work around the limited hours available for this usage. In summary, for a school district as recognized as ours, the state of our athletic fields is extremely substandard, and it is imperative that a reconstruction is undertaken. As with any significant proposal, there are many concerns and questions to be addressed, and I'd like to start this dialogue, and I imagine there'll be quite a bit, by presenting what a consensus of the school board discussed and agreed upon. To begin with, there's the question of, is there a less expensive option to be undertaken that would lead to a satisfactory outcome? The school board has determined that there is no suitable option that would cost less but still provide the facility that is necessary. An alternative option of purchasing land across the street from the high school, adjacent to the tennis courts, proved to be considerably more expensive. No off-site land areas were identified as being available, and it's a definite reality that our land holdings are extremely limited and that we need to maximize the usage of the space that we have, unlike other school districts. This fact also leads directly to the reasoning behind changing the varsity field, and at this time only the varsity field, to an artificial turf surface. A grass field cannot possibly sustain the stress placed upon it by the current utilization, let alone the increased usage that we hope to see. Anyone who tries to grow grass where we reside clearly recognizes the challenge that simple act presents. For what it's worth, we don't live in Kentucky with its more favorable soils and climate, and try as we might, we always will be left with a field whose growth will be sparse and will often be either hard or muddy or both. Without changing over to an all-weather field, we won't achieve our goal of rendering our fields more available. There are definitely other issues to be considered, and one of the primary ones is the environmental impact, and I'd like to speak to that. Currently, our fields have no system in place to prevent runoff into the adjacent Beards Creek, which in turn eventually flows into our threatened Great Bay. To try to maintain our fields in our environment, it has been imperative to use considerable quantities of fertilizer, pesticides, and herbicides, all of which I am sure end up both on the skin of our athletes as well as into Beards Creek, the inlet, and eventually into the Great Bay. And I'm sure it's recognized by all of us that one of the greatest threats to the health of the Great Bay is nitrogen runoff, which leads to algae growth, a decline in water quality, and a decline in the ability of organisms to be able to survive. This is an issue that all towns abutting the Great Bay are trying to remedy, and is a topic being scrutinized by the Environmental Protection Agency. Going forward with the athletic field reconstruction project allows us to greatly improve the drainage of all of our fields and gives us the ability to control their runoff and mitigate any possible adverse impact. Furthermore, there will no longer be the need to apply to the varsity field the pesticides, fertilizers, and herbicides that we currently utilize. The ground-up tires that are used in artificial turf are not manufactured for that purpose. They're derived from discarded tires that would either be added to landfills or being utilized for other construction projects. Less fossil fuels would be used by the district as the requirements for mowing and applying chemicals would be limited. Another important issue, of course, is the health and safety concerns. This is an area that we on the school board all had to take into consideration prior to taking our vote that led to our recommendation in favor of this warrant. As a family physician, I investigated this issue with the severe due diligence that I thought was required. I read through multiple studies, and I discounted the ones put forward by any group that might be associated with the artificial turf industry, not trusting that they would be objective and unbiased. I'll attempt to address those concerns. One possibility put forward is that an artificial turf might harbor bacteria that will lead to skin infections as athletes sustain scrapes and cuts. In fact, studies have not documented any increased prevalence of wound infections or cellulitis. It is important, however, for the artificial turf to be properly groomed, and there is the occasional need to apply bactericidal agents at recommended intervals. Another health concern is the higher ambient air temperatures found over artificial turfs as compared to turf fields. This is a definite reality and must be taken into account. Practices need to be rescheduled to avoid the extreme heat of the day if we're enduring a heat spell that is not very typical of New England. Great attention must be placed on keeping our athletes hydrated and monitored and safe. There's, of course, the great concern that chemical exposure, either through inhalation, ingestion, or through the skin, transdermal, could lead to health concerns with our athletes. There is even anecdotal evidence that artificial turf is linked to an increased prevalence of cancer. I evaluated this concern very thoroughly, as I am sure my fellow school board members did as well. The last thing that any one of us would want to do is put our athletes, our children, our students in harm's way. I read through multiple studies prepared by an assortment of organizations, including university research groups, as well as Board of Health evaluations performed by multiple states. In my research, I found nothing to support the anecdotal concerns that have been raised. Specifically, no study has concluded that there is an increased risk of developing cancer or any other health issue associated with competing on artificial turf. Earlier fields did lead to non-desirable lead exposure, but this problem has been remedied. The studies I reviewed looked at chemicals in runoff, chemicals present in the air, and whether athletes develop any health problems at a greater frequency than non-participants. A review issued by the New York State Department of Health in 2012 definitively concluded that artificial turf playing surfaces do not present any health risk to athletes. One last question is whether athletes experience a greater number of musculoskeletal injuries or head injuries, concussions, on artificial turf. With respect to head injuries, artificial turf is a more forgiving surface, especially given how compacted our soil is and its potential to freeze in the late fall and still be frozen in the spring. In addition, no programs have found any increase in musculoskeletal injuries such as fractures or ligament strains or tears. So in closing, the school board has determined that advancing the proposed athletic facility reconstruction with the reorientation of the baseball field, the improved drainage and leveling of our non-varsity field, the construction of an all-weather track that currently does not exist, and the substantial upgrade to our varsity field is the right direction for our school district and communities to take. We will be able to increase utilization in a manner that is safe and cost-effective, and will provide our students with the athletic facilities and fields that they deserve. Moreover, this project will enable there to be greater usage by the Oyster River Cooperative School District Physical Education Department, and equally as important, by our communities at large. Our youth sports programs will be able to take advantage of these upgrades, as can community members. Adult soccer leagues will have a site to play on. People can walk or jog and run safely on the track. Children can play on the fields in an ad hoc manner during the summer at a time when the fields are currently closed to be regroomed. None of us would want to spend additional money that goes to programs or projects of questionable value. None of us would want to undertake a project that might lead to adverse consequences to our children. The upgrade of the Oyster River Community Cooperative School District athletic fields is a project whose time has come after many years of hard work. It advances our schools and communities in so many important ways. Thank you very much. I know that was long.
You've heard the explanation of warrant Article 3. Are there any questions or comments? Could you mind coming down and speaking into the microphone, sir? I know this is new to you, but could you identify yourself and the town that you live in?
Durham. And Tom Newkirk, Jim, Sue Pasden. First I wanted to comment on that wonderful presentation that Dr. Rotner did. I've never seen anything so thorough in all my life. And my concern, and I guess most of you couldn't hear it because I spoke at the meeting, but the sound didn't come out well where this was discussed before, is that what I'm hoping that this project will do is present an attractive feature to our school district right out the back door of the school that will engage as many people in the school district, or particularly the high school, that we can. I want to see the 400 middle school students or so that you can see, or most of them, or half of them are Durham anyway, or Lee and Medrick, from Oyster River Youth, that you can see any Saturday in Madbury. I want to give them something to look forward to when they come to the high school. There is just a tremendous chance for these people to stray from activities that can be focused here and get into trouble if they are not involved in after-school activities. I think it's been stated that about 3/4 of the students at Oyster River are involved in the sports program in one form or another. And with the internet and the computers and all of the distractions that kids get, this is one way for the school to capture what you see on that field in Madbury every Saturday and then build on it here. And I think it's terribly important that we have a very good facility to do that. I know in comparison, this is going to cost the taxpayers of Durham less than 1/4 of what our new town hall just cost, as an example. And although I'm as tight as they get, this is something that I believe in because I'm quite familiar with some of the marginalized people that have had trouble in the school district and have not fared well in their first excursions out of the social structure of the school. And so I'm hoping that this will encourage people to go out to these and participate in these events, to witness these events as spectators. Also, I'd like to see a shift in the schools so that the kids that aren't involved in sports, I understand we have 85 people in strings now that we have a strings teacher, and I understand we may get a second strings person, but I want to see those kids going to school with people that have a good physical education program. And quite frankly, I see too many kids walking pigeon-toed these days. And so the more people we can put on that field and the more we can give them to do out there, the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Ronnie Peekins from Durham. I'd like to preface this by saying that I am voting yes. I support warrant Article 3, but I had a couple comments and questions. The first one being, I appreciate that a few things were taken out of the project, the lights and the seating, because they were considered enhancements, and the hope is that they will be fundraised privately. I think that's great, a great idea. But I question why the dugouts were taken out, because I don't personally consider them an enhancement. I think the cost is incredibly minimal compared to the $2 million of the project, and we could even save some money by having the students at the high school build them. And I was wondering if there was consideration given to having them built in-house, or if somebody would consider putting the dugouts back. I mean, it took a long time to get that dugout out there, and now you're going to get rid of it. So that was my first comment and question. And the second thing was, I was wondering if somebody could tell me what the lifespan is of the turf field and what the cost would be to replace it.
Two questions. We have somebody.
I'm going to introduce Todd Allen, our high school principal.
Mr. Allen?
Starting with the question about the dugouts. Looking at the project, I mean, the comprehensive project, if it were to include the lights, the dugouts, and the pathway, with a lit pathway to the facility, if all those things were included, the total would have been $2.5 million. And we were challenged to kind of come up with a way to package it in such a way that we could bring it in at $2 million or less. So there aren't a whole lot of things in and of themselves that could be removed from the project. Certainly we are looking at, we have a very resourceful, creative baseball coach, and he's actually already beginning to look for in-kind donations and all of those kind of things that will allow us to do that as we go. Certainly it is a relatively low-cost item, and certainly as we manage the project, if it can be put back in with the $2 million budget, certainly that would be our intent to get those. So I'm very confident that we'll be able to include those. However, we needed to be able to itemize what that $500,000 might be, and certainly the dugouts brought us to that number. So that answers that question. The other question about the life expectancy of a turf field, 10, 12, if you're really lucky, 15 years is a normal life expectancy. Replacement cost right now is about $250,000. So after 12 years, we would be looking at a potential investment in that. Certainly one of the things that has come up is looking at the various potential savings that we would have in terms of maintenance and upkeep. And in fact, Corey and I were totaling that up today, and it's actually roughly around $24,000 to $25,000 a year in terms of savings, in terms of maintenance, and potential revenues to offset that. So certainly if you thought of that over 10 years, that's roughly the equivalent to the value of the replacement.
If I can just add to that as well. I think part of the understanding is that a lot of what's going on in that project too is not going to be something that we see. A lot of it is that underpinning. It's that drainage that's being created that doesn't exist. It's going to be mitigating that runoff. So even when that top carpet needs to get replaced, we still have that infrastructure in place, which is a tremendous investment, which will serve us well.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Dan Klein, a resident of Madbury. I just want to take a very brief moment to introduce myself, which I think I already did by blocking the camera's view of the podium. I am a candidate for the Madbury seat on the school board for the next session, and I want to invite all the members of the community to contact me with any questions, comments, any sorts of feedback you might have. I'm very eager to learn more from other members of the community. And for me, this really comes down to a matter of it being an opportunity to serve the community. So I will be setting up a website very soon so you can read more about my background. I have an email address, which is Dan Klein, it's KLEINOR @gmail.com. I would encourage everyone in the Oyster River community to email me with any comments or questions you might have. And I look forward to the possibility of representing Madbury in the school board. Thank you.
Next.
Hi, Jason Seaman from Durham. I intend to support this ballot initiative at the polling station. I want to thank, I'm a member of the Parks and Recreation Committee in Durham here. I'm speaking as myself tonight, not on the part of the committee. I want to thank Todd Allen for coming into our last meeting and giving a presentation about some of the background and the history of this initiative, some of the attempts at collaborating between the school district and the three towns to develop a more comprehensive plan for field space, athletic field, playing field space in particular. On our committee, this issue has come up a couple times in the last surveys, 2007, 2011. It's an item on our master planning chapter that's being written right now. I don't know if this will address all of the playing field issues that people desire from Durham or from the broader district, but hopefully it goes some distance toward that. Todd at the meeting suggested that the school would establish a really strong spirit of cooperation with the town, so look at ORYA needs, other civic needs. So I think going forward, this is really something worth supporting because it does come up on the municipal side as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? You don't have to run.
Kate Ellis from Durham. Two questions. One, will the middle school programs be able to use this facility as well? I see nods, so I think that's a yes. And I'm wondering if there's been any thought given to a policy regarding advertising.
Thank you. Anybody answer that question on the board?
Thank you. We do have a policy on advertising, and we, as a school system, cannot use taxpayer funds to promote the outcome of a particular warrant. So you wouldn't see anything coming from the school system related to that. However, private parties may very well send out mailings.
I think your question more went to whether we would have advertising on the field.
Oh.
And that was addressed at a school board meeting. We have a policy about that. And one of the major concerns, and it was agreed upon by the board, that in no way would we have policy that was contrary to the wellness kind of concepts and sustainability concepts of our district. So I think it is open, and I hope I'm speaking correctly, correct me if I'm not, that perhaps if there's a neutral type of advertiser, that we would certainly welcome that, but we would not have a group that was going to advertise a product that went against our policies of wellness and sustainability.
Thank you. Next.
Robert Barth, Lee. I had hoped that a UNH expert would have addressed a concern I had, but apparently it's not forthcoming. I've long supported track and field improvements, but I do have a real concern about the artificial turf. As a retired radiologist with training in radiation therapy, I've encountered thousands of cancer patients, including those with mesothelioma, essentially 100% fatal. Leaving aside the several known carcinogens and 100 or so proprietary unknown ingredients in tire crumb, I would object to its use on the basis of the presence of carbon black nanoparticles alone. These particles, which comprise 30 to 60% of tires, though present, have not even been studied, to my knowledge, relative to artificial turf, are similar to asbestos fibers, the cause of mesothelioma, and preliminary animal studies have shown them to produce similar precancerous lesions. The American Cancer Society and 3 federal agencies have listed them as probably carcinogenic and requiring further study. Problem is, because of the long delay between exposure and actual malignant formation, it may be 20 years before it is scientifically concluded whether or not exposure will lead to malignancy, as was the case with asbestos. Hopefully our students will not become part of a long-range study. I'm not an expert on the subject. If anyone here has evidence absolving carbon black, please speak up, but I don't believe such evidence exists. I really feel ambivalent about this. I wholeheartedly support the concept of the track and even an artificial playing field if I could be assured that tire crumbles would not be used until they're proven to be safe. So anyway, just the other thing is that I would feel much more comfortable if there were some sort of statement that there were alternatives to tire crumbles, which I believe there are, and that the sustainability committee would be involved in recommendations, re that final decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on warrant article 3?
Ann Wright, Lee. I'm going to make an amendment to try to make an amendment to this warrant article. I'm not quite sure what the wording is. To just on the dollar amount, from $2 million down to $1,450,000. So I'm lowering it by $550,000 for the renovation and construction of athletic fields on a track at Oyster River High School, and to authorize the issuance of not more than $1,150,000 of bonds, and the rest will remain the same. Do you need that written?
Yes, something in writing.
Pardon?
You need something in writing.
I just crossed out what I needed. I completely support this warrant article. I support the track. The track has been long in coming, certainly when I moved here. Well, I just crossed out the dollar amount. Okay, thank you. And when I was on the board, certainly then they were talking about the repositioning of the fields. And I know it's been a safety issue for many, many years. So I support almost 90% of what this warrant article says. The only thing that I don't support is the artificial turf. And specifically, it's the crumb rubber infill. I know that there was a talk before here about possibly looking at alternatives, and if that's the case, that would be a wonderful thing. I know that organic infill is a lot more expensive, $250,000 more, something like that, but I'm just going to voice some of my concerns with artificial turf, regardless of that. First, I'd like to state that a bill was recently introduced in California to put a moratorium on new artificial turf fields using recycled tires until more studies have been completed regarding its safety. Most of the studies out there now have been paid for by the chemical industry or synthetic turf companies, petroleum industries. So people feel that what is out there is not accurate, and we need to do some real studies on the artificial turf industry. We have deferred maintenance on many school projects. When I was on the school board, every year we would have a warrant article that would take something from each of the schools and have it repaired, whether it was a bathroom that needed to be done, regrading on a driveway, etc. And I don't see that being done in the past few years. So I know there's some deferred maintenance. So $750,000 seems like a lot of money for our most elite athletes for 1 or 2 or 3 sports. These artificial turf fields last on average 10 years. So a high quality natural turf field could last 30 years or more if used properly. I know, talking to Todd, he feels that this would be used a lot more. I think he said if it was for games, it would be one thing, or maybe if it was used just for the varsity sports, then it could be used less. If we could go to Tibbetts Field for practice or for lacrosse, something like that, other alternatives. After 10 years, it costs money to recycle the artificial turf, carpet and infill, and then replace it. So putting a soccer field size artificial turf field in a landfill is not environmentally friendly. A school in Canada that wanted to do this researched this very extensively, and they came up with a way that they could remain carbon neutral, and it involved planting 1,800 coniferous trees, medium-sized coniferous trees. So if that's a route we want to go and stay environmentally friendly, maybe we should think about it. I think Kenny was talking about how using herbicides and pesticides, and I just can't imagine that we would use herbicides and pesticides on a field. It's certainly not best practices. Fertilizer, of course, but the trend is more toward low application rates and slow release nitrogen carriers. And also, if you have grass as opposed to artificial turf, the roots of the grass help absorb that. It's like a natural filtering system. Again, you don't have that with artificial turf. So and there are a lot of chemicals in artificial turf, it will just leach straight down into the drains. So a high quality, when I say a high quality one, I'm talking about getting the best of the best in here to consult and say, what can we do in our field? Let's pay top dollar for the best field that we can get for our varsity team. Turf grass also supports earthworm populations, which contribute to aerated soil, higher water holding capacity, and improved soil structure.
Artificial turf does not sustain life. Through photosynthesis, of course, turf grass reduces atmospheric carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. Artificial turf releases gases from the toxins in the crumb rubber. And some of those chemicals in crumb rubber, and I won't begin to name them all, we'd be here all night, are arsenic, benzene, cadmium, PBDEs, mercury, naphthene, phenols, PAHs, styrene, butadiene, I don't even know how to pronounce some of these. The crumb rubber breaks up over time and turns into dust that then is very easily inhaled. Carbon black makes up 30 to 50 or more % of the crumb rubber, and their nanotubes have been compared, like Bob said, with asbestos. According to the CDC, heat illness during practice or competition is a leading cause of death and disability among U.S. high school athletes. The rubber infill will heat up several dozen degrees higher than the air temperature. And elite athletes don't prefer artificial turf. In fact, there are only 2 Major League Baseball stadiums left that have artificial turf. In 2008, over 1,500 NFL players were surveyed, and 85% responded that artificial turf causes them more injuries, and 92% thought artificial turf would shorten their careers. If you noticed on Sunday, they didn't play on artificial turf at the Super Bowl. The Women's World Cup participants recently tried to sue the Canadian Soccer Association and FIFA because they were being forced to play on artificial turf during the World Cup while the men were not. So those are just some of the points that I wanted to make, why I think that we should consider as a community this amendment to lower the amount for a high quality natural turf field as opposed to an artificial turf field for environmental and economic and health reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
What's the actual motion?
The motion that the amount in your handout be changed from the first number of 1.7 million to 1,150,000.
No.
I'm sorry, I read down too far. Excuse me. Let's go back. Shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $1,450,000 for the renovation and construction, and that all continues on the same. The second number then changes from $1,700,000 to $1,150,000. The rest continues on the same.
In effect, it lowers a $750,000 artificial turf field to $550,000, giving it a $200,000 for that one field alone.
That's the motion. Is there a second? Is there a second? There is no second. I'm sorry? Where is the second? We have a motion. We have a second. Is there any further discussion on the amendment to warrant Article 3?
Hi, my name is Glenn Miller. I live in Lady. My wife and I have 5 children, 2 of whom have already graduated from Oyster River, 1 who's at high school now, and 2 that are in the middle school. I happen to also be the softball coach for the high school varsity softball program. So I'm definitely want to let you know that I'm probably biased because of that. I definitely favor the proposed renovation, including the turf field. But what I wanted to address right now were some questions about the carbon black, because it turns out I'm also a professor of organic chemistry at the University of New Hampshire. I'm director of the material science program, and for 10 years I was the UNH director of a nanoscale science and engineering center where we looked at all sorts of problems related to nanoparticles, and in particular carbon nanotubes happen to be one of our specialties. So I wanted to talk about some of the questions that were raised here tonight, as well as some things that were circulated in the document, I think widely circulated around town in the document. So let me just quote directly from that document, and it mimics some of the things that were stated here today. Carbon black nanotubes Carbon black nanotubes make up 30% or more of ground tires. Like asbestos, the consequences of inhaling these nanotubes, which are too small to see, but present in crumb rubber and exposed in the dust, may not be apparent for 30 or 40 years. So this sounds very ominous, and I think it's important to note that carbon black and carbon nanotubes are completely different entities, completely different materials. They are not structurally related to one another, and there is not carbon nanotubes, which is the material of concern in carbon black. Carbon black has been used as a filler material for various polymers, including rubber, for approximately 100 years. It's safe to say that all of us, at least those of us who have changed a tire or handled a car tire or a bicycle tire, have had some exposure to carbon black, probably a lot of exposure and experience with carbon black. Carbon black has been used for 100 years. Carbon nanotubes, on the other hand, are relatively new. They were first discovered in about 1990. And while they're related to carbon black in the sense that they're made of carbon, they are completely different. Carbon nanotubes are really remarkable materials. One of the reasons that our center at UNH studied them for 10 years is because they have incredible electronic and mechanical properties. They can be conducting, they can be semiconducting. They're lighter than feathers, but their tensile strength is stronger than steel. They're really amazing materials. But they're also fairly expensive. And although there's been a tremendous amount of research with carbon nanotubes and their use in all sorts of electronic and mechanical applications, and I don't doubt for a minute that if you Googled carbon nanotubes and rubber tires, you'd find some folks that had been thinking about such things. But this is research. These are not commercial products. The fact of the matter is there's a large company in Europe, Bayer, this is the same company that makes Bayer aspirin, that considered this very possibility and reached the conclusion that it's just not economically viable. Carbon nanotubes are just too expensive. Carbon black is as cheap as dirt. If you're going to use something as a filler for rubber, you want the cheap material, not the expensive material. There are no carbon nanotubes in rubber tires. Just simply put, they're just not there. So I wanted to clear that up. Now, there are no nanotubes in rubber tires, so it's probably not even appropriate to make the next point, but I feel obligated to do so. There's been some discussion about the link between carbon nanotubes and asbestos. It turns out that our lungs have a very strong capacity to clear all sorts of junk, including very large particles like pollen, dirt, dust, etc. And our lungs have a very strong capacity to clear very small particles, like at the molecular or nanoscale, like carbon nanotubes. What our lungs don't do really well, what they're not engineered to do really well, is to clear the particles that are somewhere in the middle, micron-sized or micron-scale particles, like asbestos. Asbestos just, unfortunately, some of those fibers, some of those airborne fibers just happen to be the wrong size, and our lungs can't get rid of them. It's very different from carbon nanotubes. As I said, I probably shouldn't have made that point because carbon nanotubes are not in rubber in the first place, but I felt obligated to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody hasn't spoken yet? Excuse me, somebody hasn't spoken yet? Okay. Sure. Identify yourself again so we realize who's speaking.
Thanks to the previous speaker. I'd like to clarify that I did not refer to carbon nanotubes. I referred to nanoparticles. And in my ignorance, I don't know what a nanoparticle is either relative to a nanotube, but I realize there is a difference. I just wondered if you could tell me the difference between a carbon black nanoparticle and a carbon black nanotube.
Well, excuse me.
Is there a valid?
The questions need to come up here. We really can't have a discussion in the crowd, so you can come up to the microphone if you want.
So the term nanoparticle just simply refers to the size of the particle. We have to be on the nano scale, which means 10 to the minus 9 meters is 1 nanometer. So it just refers to the size of the particle. The term carbon black nanoparticle is not a term. Carbon black is not a nanoparticle. It's not. It's just, they don't go together. So there are nanoparticles of all different types, not just carbon, but many other types. And there are larger particles, which carbon black would fall in the category of. But there are no carbon black nanotubes. There are carbon nanotubes and there is carbon black, but carbon black nanotubes is some sort of marriage of these terms, which doesn't seem appropriate to me.
Thank you. Next. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to address, can you hear me?
Of course.
One of the points made, and I don't support this amendment, one of the points made was that somehow we were delaying capital improvement because we were going to do the track. And actually, over the last 3 years, we've reduced the $4 million of capital improvement to under $3 million. And just this fall, the school board approved the strategic plan, the operational side of which was a 5-year plan that addresses getting us up to speed or getting us up to current with our capital improvement needs. And in fact, you'll see, I hate to steal Tom's thunder, but it's part of the budget is increasing the capital improvement. So in no way does moving forward the athletic facility somehow mean that we're not doing capital improvement. And the second is that we did actually spend a considerable amount of money having experts look at our field. And long ago I asked the question, well, why can't we just have a turf field? And it's because you cannot simply have one field with this amount of usage. What they said is normally you would have much more practice fields and then you would have a playing field. And that's in the NFL or in the baseball, they aren't using that field every day to the extent that we are, and therefore they can allow the field to grow. We just can't. We need to use it at a much higher rate because we don't have enough fields. So if we had more practice fields, you could have this wonderful turf field. Unfortunately, we don't. And in about 2 months, when unfortunately no magic has occurred under the snow that's out there right now, and when the lacrosse players go out there, what you'll see is it is not a rich turf field like the Patriots played on last weekend. It's mostly dirt around the goal posts, and the middle is also dirt. It's not a thick turf field, so I don't think that's an accurate description. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, Robert Sullivan. I live in Durham. I don't support this amendment, and I think the intensity of the use of the field is one of the critical things that the school system is trying to accomplish. And I think if you look at that picture, to me, the ratio is something like a 3 or 4 to 1. So you would need 3 grass fields to be equivalent to the same intensity of use of 1 turf field. So what that means to me is that we would have to, somewhere else in the district, eventually, to satisfy the demand for more sports fields, you would have that same pressure just moved from this already developed space to somewhere else. I would use the examples of Tibbetts Field, which used to be agricultural land, and is now a wonderful soccer complex, but it's a very large facility. And for the specifics of biological life and what's the value of land that's undeveloped, there is a lot more life in woods that won't be cut down or agricultural land that won't be turned into sports fields than we would retain by using a grass field here.
Thank you. Next.
I'm Daniel Day from Durham. I graduated Oyster River in 2009, and I ran cross country and track since 5th grade, 8 years total in both middle school and high school. And I gotta say, running cross country and track was probably one of the best experiences I had while at Oyster River. I learned a lot of great life lessons, a lot of team building, and just overall confidence and mental and physical gain I got while doing it. Pretty much the worst part about running cross country and track for Oyster River was the fact that we didn't have a track. I mean, it was great how we got to practice at UNH, but it would have been much better if we could pretty much use the track whenever we wanted, closer to our own school. I know there's a lot of concern about potential risks that may be involved with artificial turf fields, but there's plenty of risks with our existing fields. The chemicals and pesticides in the grass could be just as bad, if not worse, than the turf. And also there is a huge risk of injury on these fields we have. Although this wasn't on our fields here, I actually once got a pretty serious injury on a grass field that wasn't properly maintained, properly upgraded. Probably maintained as possibly good as it could have been, but it was pretty much like the fields we have. And I still have some pain and trouble at times from the injury I got on that field. So it is important. We got to make sure no student at Oyster River or anyone in our community has to go through what I went through ever again. The time really is now. We need to upgrade this. If some more research turns up in 10 years when the existing field's life is coming to an end, we can talk about it then. Talk about alternatives to turf, natural grass. But this is a very modest upgrade that we're doing that will just bring our facilities to meet the basic needs of Oyster River athletes. And it's being very responsible with the spending as well. Thank you.
Any further discussion to the amendment that we're talking about here?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'm opposed to the amendment, and I'd like to address some of the environmental concerns that were raised. My name is Kevin Gardner. I'm a Durham resident. I have 2 above-average girls in the Oyster River School District. Along with everybody else that's above average. So I'm also a professor at the University of New Hampshire, and my areas of expertise is environmental engineering, and I study, in particular, recycled materials use and the human risk associated with chemicals in recycled materials and use of recycled materials. And so because of some of the concerns that were raised, I did do a little bit of research on this issue, and it's been studied pretty significantly, and I don't want to repeat what Kenny already talked about in terms of the human health risks, but there are chemicals in tire rubber, chrome rubber that's reused, but it's the exposure and ingestion or dermal contact and so forth that is significant to consider there. There's been a lot of studies with professional athletes who are, exposed to this stuff 5 or 7 days a week, much more intensely than amateur athletes, and a lot of extensive testing, and so of all different sorts, both physical measurements of VOC and SVOC concentrations above the turf, where you could have, with elevated temperatures that you could have volatilization of these compounds that are bad for you, and inhalation and so forth. You could have ingestion of particles, and there's a lot of different routes of exposure, and these have all been looked at really carefully. And I'll just read a conclusion from the review study that I was looking at, which says that health risk assessment studies suggested that users of artificial turf fields, even professional athletes, were not exposed to elevated risks. The other passion that I have, and so just so you know, this is something I take really seriously, both environmental responsibility and sustainability, and so the other kind of work that I do is really sustainability assessment and analysis, and the way that we typically understand those is to do what's called a life cycle assessment. And it provides lots of really useful information, and it enables you to compare 2 things on equal footing. And it provides a lot of really inconvenient truths, like, is it really better to use a paper bag at the grocery store, a plastic bag, or use your own bag? And you never like the answer that it comes up with, because you look at the entire life cycle. So if we look at the entire life cycle of that artificial turf field, and what goes into making it, maintaining it, its end of life, it needs to be replaced and so forth, and do the same thing with the grass field. We look at the equivalent grass field and what it needs to make it, to maintain it, to keep it up, and if there's a disposal phase, to dispose of that. So we look at the entire life cycle. It turns out that the sustainability analysis or the overall environmental impact from an artificial turf field is significantly less than a grass field. And it's counterintuitive, and I understand that it's counterintuitive. But a big part of that is whether you compare, if you compare one piece of grass with one piece of artificial turf, like one field, then they have essentially equivalent impacts. And they're not all the same. So the greenhouse gas emissions are higher for the artificial turf field, but there's other factors like toxicity associated with herbicides or fertilizer runoff that are associated with the grass field. So these things, if you weigh them all out as you would do in a life cycle assessment, they're equivalent. But as Mr. Sullivan pointed out, if the turf gets 4 times the use, so for example, the children, the Oyster River Youth Association are playing on it, and there's tournaments on it in the summer, something like that. Now you need to compare it on an equal footing, and it's really not an equal footing because they're not equal. One grass field is not equal to one artificial turf field. So you really need to compare it in an equal basis. So you need to use some factor like 4 grass fields to 1 turf field. So the overall assessment is essentially that artificial turf field is a more responsible product from a life cycle perspective. So understanding the sustainability and the overall environmental impacts and taking into consideration Birds Creek in the bay and so forth. Thank you.
Shopping bag.
Shopping bag? You don't want to know.
Next.
I'm John Parsons. I'd like to call the question on the amendment so we can move on to the original article, please.
Question has been called. Is there a second? Second. All in favor to call the question? All opposed? Okay. Let me go back to the amendment to warrant Article 3. The amendment to warrant Article 3 changes the first amount from $2 million to $1,450,000. It changes the second amount from $1,700,000 to $1,150,000. Everything else in the article remains the same. So those in favor of amending the article to reduce the amount signify by raising their cards. Those opposed? The amendment fails. Is there any further discussion on warrant Article 3?
Maybe unnecessary. I did want to just take a quick moment to talk a little bit about the history of this project, just to make sure people understand. This is, I was touched by Daniel Day coming up here and commenting on his experience with this facility. I remember when Daniel was a 5th grader on the cross-country middle school track team, and us saying to Daniel, yes, Daniel, before you graduate from high school, you will run on the track at Oyster River High School. How'd that turn out, Dan? So I do want to kind of paint the picture that this is not a new issue to this community. This is 1998 was when this issue first was addressed. Quite frankly, it's really been on the minds of people who have been active in athletics in the Oyster River community for a lot longer than that. But 1998 was when it first came up in the form of Friends of Oyster River Track to try to raise the issue. It became very quickly obvious that in order to have a track on the same site, we needed to kind of look at the whole picture of the facility. It didn't make sense to spend money on a track without asking the question, what is that? You know, what are the other sports that are involved? And one of the things that I'm really proud of in this proposal is this is a comprehensive athletic fields upgrade proposal. It does get us that track, which certainly drew me into it, many others into it initially, but it also is getting the baseball program a new field. It's getting the softball program a new field. It's getting the field hockey team a new field. It's getting soccer a new field. It's getting lacrosse a new field. One of the things that I would point out, in 1999, there was no lacrosse program in the Oyster River District. And I love lacrosse, I think it's wonderful, but that was a tipping point for our district in terms of field utilization. We now have hundreds of kids in the district who are playing lacrosse, and it's a high impact sport on athletic fields. So I'm glad that the previous amendment was not brought forward, because I do believe athletic artificial turf is a key component of this because it's the way to maximize a very small lot and to make sure that we're able to meet the needs of a whole wide range of athletes, community members, and so forth. And just on a kind of a side note, I am a Lee taxpayer, and it isn't lost on me that the impact on the taxes in Lee are higher than the other two towns. But I do think it's a very worthwhile investment for basically in the town of Lee for a $300,000 home. It's about $54 a year at most to get this project done. And I'm personally happy to eliminate a cup of coffee a month for the year to be able to see our kids compete on a field that they deserve. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Any new or future discussion on the question? It's been seconded. No further discussion. I'll read the warrant article. Shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $2 million for the renovation and construction of athletic fields and a track at Oyster River High School and authorize the issuance of not more than $1,700,000 of bonds or notes to be paid over a 10-year period in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Finance Act, RSA Chapter 33, and to authorize the school board to issue and negotiate such bonds or notes, and in addition to raise and appropriate the sum of $36,833 for the first year's principal and interest payment on the bonds or notes, and $300,000 to come from an expendable trust fund for this purpose. The school board recommends this appropriation. A 3/5 ballot vote would be required. Those in favor of warrant article 3 as written signify by raising your cards. Those opposed, warrant article 3 passes. Warrant article 4 will be presented by Denise Day.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to present warrant article 4. Shall the district vote to approve within the provisions of the New Hampshire RSA 273-A3 the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Oyster River Bus Drivers Association, ORBDA, and the Oyster River School Board, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels. 2015, 2016, $69,147. 2016, 2017, $21,726. 2017, 2018, $21,274. And further to raise and appropriate the sum of $69,147 for the 2015-2016 fiscal year, such sum representing the additional costs attributable to the increases in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels. And the school board recommends this appropriation, and majority vote is required. I'd like to move the... First time I've done this here.
Warrant article has been moved. Is there a second? There is.
Okay.
Discussion.
Thank you. Okay, so in this agreement, what we've done is we realized, first of all, that the beginning bus driver salaries were not competitive. So what this agreement does is raise that beginning driver salaries so that it's competitive with area schools. And it standardizes sick and personal hours to match the individual workday. And finally, what it did was collapse the salary schedule. The previous agreement had 30 separate steps, and the new agreement is now collapsed to 21.
That was the explanation. Is there any discussion on warrant article 4? I don't see any. I'll read warrant article 4. Shall the district vote to approve within the provisions of New Hampshire RSA 273A3 the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Oyster River Bus Drivers Association and the Oyster River School Board, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels: 2015-2016, $69,147; 2016-2017, $21,274; $726, 2017, 2018, $21,274, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $69,147 for the 2015-16 fiscal year, such sum representing additional costs attributable to the increases in salaries and benefits required by this new agreement over those that would have been paid at the current staffing levels. The school board recommends this appropriation, majority vote required. All those in favor of Article 4 as read, signify by passing your cards. Those opposed, by raising your cards. Warrant Article 4 passes. Warrant Article 5 will be presented by Edward Chalet.
I'd like to move that the district approve warrant Article 5, which states, shall the district vote to approve within the provisions of New Hampshire RSA 273-A:3 the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between Oyster River Paraprofessionals and support staff, PASS, and the Oyster River School Board, which calls for the following increases in salaries, benefits at the current staffing levels. 2015 to 2016, $135,624. 2016 to 2017, $121,343. And 2017 to 2018, $84,600. And further to raise and appropriate, this will sound familiar, and further raise and appropriate the sum of $135,624 for the 2015-2016 fiscal year, such sum representing the additional costs to the increases in the salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would be paid at the current staffing levels. And the school board recommends this appropriation and majority vote is required. And in explanation that this is a warrant article regarding the paraprofessionals, support staff, and food service.
Been moved, do we have a second? Second.
And this warrant article is in general to correct pay freeze inequity that it has been found that the new hirees for the paraprofessional and food service staff are actually being brought in at requiring higher salaries than the existing senior staff. Part of the bargaining that was important to district costs was that it involved changing the pharmacy card, so there's a larger deductible and significantly lowers district costs. It provides recall language and aligns holidays between the two groups.
You heard warrant Article 5. Is there any discussion on warrant Article 5?
Hi, I'm Lauren Selig. I live here in Durham, and I just want to speak in favor of this motion. I think we have some of the hardest working parents in the district. I just want to highlight Mr. Reed, who I first met when he was working part-time at the high school and part-time in my younger daughter's kindergarten classroom, and has been working in my older daughter's 4th grade for 2 years. And while technically he's a one-on-one paraprofessional, every child in that room adores him, and he does so much more than what his job is, and I know that all of the paraprofessionals do that.
Thank you. Any further discussion on warrant Article 5? I don't see any. I'll read it, the article. It's been moved and seconded. Warrant Article 5, shall the district vote and approve within the provisions of New Hampshire RSA 273-A:3 the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Oyster River Paraprofessionals and support staff and the Oyster River School Board, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels. 2015, 2016, $135,624, 2016, 2017, $121,343, 2017, 2018, $84,600. And further raise and appropriate the sum of $135,624 for the 2015-2016 fiscal year, such sum representing the additional costs attributable to the increases in the salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would have been paid at current staffing levels. School board recommends this appropriation, majority vote required. Those in favor of warrant Article 5 signify by raising your cards. Those opposed signify by raising your cards. Warrant Article 5 passes. Warrant Article 6, Alan Hotland.
I'd like to make a motion to approve warrant Article 6, which states, shall the district vote to create an expendable trust fund under the provisions of RSA 198:20-C to be known as the Benefit Stabilization Fund for the purpose of offsetting unexpected increases in various benefits in which the principal and interest may be appropriated and expended. Furthermore, to raise and appropriate a sum of up to $200,000 to be added to the Benefit Stabilization Expendable Trust Fund, with such amount to be funded from the year-end undesignated fund balance, and to name the school board as agents to expend this fund. The school board recommends this appropriation. Sorry.
There's a motion. Do we have a second? We do. Explanation.
Okay, so I'll start by the explanation that's going to be on the ballot, which says, this fund is if established, would be a reserve fund to be used in the event of a major or unexpected increase. There we go. Increase in benefit costs. In recent years, New Hampshire has shifted nearly $1 million to fund state retirement, which has had a direct impact on local taxpayers. The unpredictability of health insurance increases, sometimes over 10%, also impacts local taxpayers. This reserve fund, if approved, would help lower these unanticipated costs. The funds to support this would come from the current year-end undesignated fund balance. The school board would be agents of this fund, so any expenditure would need prior approval from the school board. All right, let me try to do a better job of explaining that. I'm going to start with the explanation. So, over the course of the last 3 years, a real theme that Dr. Morris has shown is we've tried to balance fiscal responsibility, because the taxpayers of the Oyster River District have been incredibly generous, but also not just try to maintain our schools, but to improve them, which is a really difficult task. And it's been made much more difficult by the fact we've had a large unfunded mandate coming down, which is the Common Core. And as we develop our budgets in the fall, we have 2 wild cards that consistently hit us. The budget we're really beginning to develop in August, and we look at the first pass in October, but 2 large drivers we don't find out until November. And the first one, which we've placed up here, is health insurance costs. And as you can see, it's really variable. We don't have a good idea what the costs are going to be. So we develop our budget, kind of hold our fingers, and in November we find out what the real costs are. And those can have a tremendous impact. As you can see, we've been very, very fortunate the last couple of years because we haven't been hit by a large spike, but that's really dependent upon how much we use our insurance. And other districts have been hit with very, very large costs. The second one, if that's not enough unpredictability for you, the second one is the state has been downshifting on a 2-year cycle now, retirement contribution costs for us. So 2 years ago, we were hit with almost over $600,000. And again, that came to us around November that we were told this. So that would represent 1.5% of our budget. This year, it was a little bit better, but it was almost $300,000. So it makes it very, very difficult for us to predict. And since it hits at such a late time, it means that we have very few options to deal with it. We can either pass it all along to the taxpayer, we can make cuts And of course, those cuts really are not necessarily the best cuts educationally. The quickest way that we can come up with getting our budget down. Or we can do a combination of both. So by having this fund, it really is buying us some time. It allows us to take this money and try to offset some of those costs the first year, and then gives us a year to work through how we can actually ramp up to this cost. And again, the health insurance and the retirement are hitting us at 2-year intervals. So if I go back, what does that actually, let's see if I can find this up here. Is that it? What does that mean to you guys, the tax impact? So the first is we are not actually asking for new money from you. We are going to use the end of year unexpended money that we had in the budget. And we've been fortunate this year. You may remember last year when we had the Mohammed Cafeteria project come up. We had money come to us from the LGC, the local government center, coming back to us from taxes. And we've been fortunate again to have it this year. So we would have a combination of that LGC money as well as unfunded balance and potentially some of our tuition money. So there would be no new taxes that we would ask for, but of course we could give you this $200,000 back, so it will eventually have a tax impact on you. So for Durham it'd be 11 cents per thousand, for Lee it'd be 15 cents per thousand, and for Madbury it'd be 12 cents per thousand. And that's it.
You've heard the explanation to warrant Article 6. Is there any discussion on warrant Article 6? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Dean Rubine from Lee. I'm against this warrant article. The district has a number of these funds with various amounts of money in it that have various incantations you have to do to add money to them or to remove them. This one, for example, only covers benefits. We have another reserve fund that requires I think the Commissioner of the Board of Education to spend. And in general, they're going to take basically $200,000 out of our pockets every year, and give it back to us when they get some sort of shock. And I personally would prefer to hang on to the $200,000, and when the time comes we have to pay up, well, we pay up or we deal with it. And so I'm not going to recommend that this be amended now, but I'm going to vote no in March.
Thank you.
Can I make a correction? It's not $200,000 every year. Actually, there's only one warrant. We would have to develop another warrant, so it's a one-time thing, actually.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on warrant Article 6?
Hi, my name's Brad Nichols from Durham. I'm just curious what percentage of our annual benefits this $200,000 would represent?
Good question. Well, I can give you an exact number, but it would be an extremely low percentage because our benefits are, collectively in the billions.
Right, so a 5% increase in the benefit cost, this would really not have much of an impact in that.
It would not immediately have an impact. I think as Al Howland explained, what you're trying to do is create a bridge so that you don't have to get that increase. We say that it was one of those 10% increases or 5% increases all in one tax year. So the idea is to mitigate that sudden increase over a couple of years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Maybe just to add as well, although it's called benefit stabilization, and we think of benefits, maybe we talked about healthcare costs, but there is that retirement fund, which maybe we don't actually think of a benefit, and that's been one of the really big hits to the district, and this allows us to be able to be able to cover that kind of expenditure without cutting programming in our schools or dramatically raising the budget increase. So it's not just healthcare costs, benefits. It's something that comes from the state, the retirement money they provide us.
Is there any further discussion on warrant Article 6? It's been moved and seconded. I'll read the article. Warrant Article 6, shall the district vote to create an expendable trust fund under the provisions of RSA 198:20C to be known as the Benefit Stabilization Fund for the purpose of offsetting unexpected increases in various benefits in which the principal and interest may be appropriated and expended. Furthermore, to raise and appropriate a sum of up to $200,000 be added to the Benefit Stabilization Expendable Trust Fund, with such amounts to be funded from the year-end undesignated fund balance, and to name the school board as agents to expend this from this fund. The school board recommends this appropriation. A majority vote will be required. All those in favor of warrant Article 6 as presented, please raise your cards. All those opposed? Warrant Article 6 passes. Warrant Article 7, Thomas Newkirk.
I have to have the big print because I can't quite read this. When I was in your situation, as I have been a number of times, I just prayed that I wouldn't get overwhelmed with numbers. And there's so many numbers in a budget of this size, so what I'll try to do is keep those to a minimum. And to try to give you the major numbers that can help you understand the logic of what we've done and what we're asking. So I'll start by reading the warrant article. Shall the district raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant article and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $40,759,297, distributed as follows. Fund 10 equals $39,454,621, regular operating budget. Fund 21, $643,676, expenditures from food service revenues. Fund 22 equals $600,000, expenditures from federal special revenues. Fund 23, $61,000, expenditures from pass-through funds. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget will be $38,858,410. That will be the default budget, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action by the district or by law. Or the district may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, 10 and 16 to take up the issue of the revised operating budget only. The school board recommends this appropriation, a majority vote required, so I move warrant Article 7.
Move. Is there a second? A second. Explanation?
Okay, I'm going to start with the budget goal that we set at the beginning of the school year in October, and I'll read that. Given that the district has over $3 million in unmet capital needs, that the technology plan is only 66% implemented, that the bus fleet rotation needs to continue, that negotiations with bus drivers and support staff have unknown costs, that text academic resources must be placed in a predictable rotation. The Oyster River Cooperative School District will strive to keep the 2015-16 operating budget to 3% or less. This goal does not include cost increases or shifts from the state of New Hampshire beyond local control. This goal does not include the separate warrant articles. Okay, that was the goal that we set in October, and as Al said at that time, there are all kinds of unknown costs that come up, whether there's going to be downshifts from the state, and what the warrant articles will, how the negotiations will go, and what health costs would be. We anticipated that health costs would be about 6%. They turned out to be almost flat, which was great news for us. We did have one unexpected and unpleasant surprise, and that was a downshifting of $260,000 from the state for retirement. This has happened before. Now, the budget goal that we set of 3% did not include that downshifting, but the budget we're putting before you tonight is 2.8%, which does include that downshifting. Had that downshifting not occurred, this warrant article would be at 2.12%, which is just slightly above inflation. So we feel that this budget is much more beneficial than the one that we even hoped to achieve when we set the budget goal. And so I'm going to take you through a few numbers just to see how we got there. Okay? Now so I'm going to look at some of the what we call the drivers, the expenses that pushed the budget up this year, and explain very briefly why. And then we can get into deeper explanations if you request those. Okay? One of the factors that's driving the budget up is the increase in the size of the high school. The high school is at about 715 this year, and it's because of the big classes coming up through the middle school, and because of the increase in the bearings of students, we anticipate it at about 760 next year and probably through about 2021. So we're having a bigger high school, which is putting pressure on certain academic areas. And so what this budget includes is increases in 4 positions. The increase in a 6% increase in a math teacher position, a 4% increase in a science position, essentially taking a part-time position and making it a full-time position, 0.4% increase in world languages to deal with the increased need, particularly in the early Spanish and French classes. And then there was an elimination of the family studies position a couple of years ago, and we wanted to retain an early childhood course from that. So we have a contract with the Stratford Learning Center so that course where students could get dual high school college credit and work as a practicum with the PEP program. It's a great course that we'd like to keep, so we're contracting to bring that in. We also have a paraprofessional at Maharmet to work at integration of technology. We have one of those paraprofessionals at Massway, so there's an equity issue here, and this will help teachers integrate technology into the academic areas. One full-time position on this list is the IT support technician. There have been reductions in the technology program, and the decreases in employment there have caused the director of technology often to have to do some first-line maintenance for technology, so people have to go to him, where I think his work should be spent probably bigger, more global issues in terms of the district. So this would give the kind of tech support. And any of you, and we all know what it's like, right? You know, something goes wrong, and certainly people in my generation, you think like the world is falling apart. You plugged it in, it doesn't work, and then you have that really sinking feeling. You need somebody to help you out. And so what this does is it gives greater support for teachers, because I think when that happens, you waste time. And I think teachers lose faith in technology. Is that right, Josh? Yeah. So this is to help out with that. So it's certainly to use Josh Olstad's time better in the technology program. So we're convinced that that's a good position. And then the final one is the strings program, which is a really success story, the expansion of the music program. And this year we had a scramble to get money because of the need for more students wanting strings instruction, and so we've put that in the budget for this year. So one of the drivers is the additional staff. Okay. Other drivers of the budget are salary and benefits. The teacher contract has about a 2.7 increase in their salaries, and that's certainly a big part of this. We have, I think as Al has alluded to, we have an aggressive plan to address the capital needs. One of the things that has been a theme of our work in the district is get a plan so that you don't build up needs so that a future board's going to have to scramble and things are going to fall apart. You have a plan, so we have a 7-year plan, a strategic plan. We're in, I think, the third year of that. And I was talking to Jim Rizicki, before I made my presentation, and he said that every bit of his budget is going to capital needs, improving capital needs. And I said, how can you do that? Because you have increase in salaries, you have other increases that you have to cover. And he said he's covered all that by savings, which I think is great. So the capital needs, some of the things that are going to be happening this year are a new generator at Maharmet School. There's one at Massway, so we need a generator. There's going to be work on in the the all-purpose room at the middle school, the ventilation, replacing ventilation units. So there's this plan systematically to take care of those $4.2 million in capital needs. And so we really appreciate the great skill that you've, in terms of constructing that budget. Technology, again, we have a plan to move forward in technology. We've done things with increasing broadband use in earlier years, and this year there's going to be a lot of work in the library, purchasing projectors for classrooms, and then just getting more computers for students to use. And one of the things, as Al mentioned, that some of this is in need to give the Smarter Balance test, because that's an online test, and in the middle school, every kid in the middle school has to take that test, which is putting real pressure on the school. So we want to be able to do that and do that well. So that's part of the capital technology budget. And then, as I mentioned, there's the $260,000 shift from the retirement fund that we've absorbed. Okay, in terms of revenues, we anticipate a fund balance of $350,000, which we pass back to the towns. In terms of state aid to the towns, Durham will receive $100,614, Lee $33,018, and Madbury $79,980. And I think that the cause for Lee having a smaller amount is they've had fewer students this year, and that's a big factor in terms of the increase in state aid. And we have the estimated Barrington. We estimate there are going to be more Barrington students, which will produce $206,000 in additional revenue. Okay. Okay. Now, what we've also done, or Sue Caswell has done, is to project what these increases will mean for the towns. And so what we've done is we've looked, she's used the formula, which she's explained to me, and it includes both the property values, the assessed property values in each town, and students. And so there's a formula that indicates what the assignment of cost to each town would be. And so what we've done is we've showed what the proposed operating budget would cost, and then what would happen if each warrant article passes. And so the total fiscal year operating budget, if everything passes, would be $39,696, $39,696,225, which would mean for Durham, and these are estimates too, and Durham with the TIF and all the stuff going on, it's not always clear what's going to happen in Durham, but 54 cents per $1,000 estimate. For Lee, 79 cents per thousand, and for Madbury, 42 cents per thousand. And the reason those are different is because of the formula that's used to assign. That's the reason for the difference there. Finally, we have the difference between the requested operating budget and the total default budget. So as I said, the requested operating budget is $39,454,621. The total default budget is $38,858,410. So a difference of about, what's that? About $600,000. So if the budget is defeated, it would mean that pretty much call a halt to the increases in the strategic plan. It would put the strategic plan in real jeopardy. It would mean that we wouldn't be able to do the hiring that we need to maintain to deal with the increases in student attendance in the high school. And it would mean that probably all the new positions that we're proposing would not be able to fill those. So stop here. Thank you.
Article 7 has been moved and seconded. You've heard the explanation. Are there any questions or discussions on warrant Article 7? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Dean Rubine from Lee. I support the board and their budget. I think they did a great job, and I'm looking forward to voting for it in March and having it unamended here. I did want to make a couple of points. First of all, there was an article in the Foster's about the deliberative session today, which listed the budget increase as 1.7 million, which would be 4-point-something%, and I think that's just wrong. If you look at the two operating budgets on the warrants and divide, you get 3.7%. So maybe you guys want to come up with an answer for that. That's what when I just did it, I got 39.5 million divided by 38.1 million. The one thing about the budget goal I didn't like is you included sort of in the little explanation part, negotiations with bus drivers and support staff. Those are explicitly excluded from this 3% because they're separate warrant articles, so they can't really be the explanation for why this one is going up. Anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you.
I asked Sue to calculate, I'm not sure this is a number that you want, but I asked Sue to calculate what the percentage of increase we're just passing on to the towns. You know, if you calculate warrant articles, the operating budget, minus the revenue that we're getting, what we're passing on to the towns, the figure that she arrived at was 3.16.
Your budget goal stated that you were constraining the operating budget, not.
I know. This
figure that you're telling me here.
This is the total cost we're passing on to the taxpayers. 3.16 increase. Okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion on warrant Article 7? We may set a record. It has been moved and seconded. I'll read it, and then we'll vote on it. Warrant Article 7. Shall the district raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant article and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purpose set forth therein, totaling $4,759,297, distributed as follows: Fund 10, $39,454,621. Regular operating budget, Fund 21, $643,676. Expenditures from the food service revenues, Fund 22, $600,000. Expenditures from federal special revenues, Fund 23, $61,000. Expenditures from pass-through funds. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget shall be $38,858,410. The default budget, which is the same as last year's with certain adjustments required by previous action of the district or by law. Or the district may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, Roman 10, and Roman 16, to take up the issues of the revised operating budget only. The school board recommends this appropriation, majority vote required. Those that support warrant Article 7, as written, signify by raising your cards. Those that oppose, signify by raising your cards. Warrant Article 7 passes. Mr. Parsons.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, sir. There's a move to adjourn. There's a second. I just read the voting times. On March 10th, 2015, in the town of Durham, Oyster River High School, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The town of Lee Safety Complex, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Town of Madbury Town Hall, 11 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. I'd like to thank everybody. For some reason, I enjoy doing this. Nobody can figure that out, but thank you very much, and we'll see you at the polls. We're adjourned.